Thank you, Mr Assistant President. The Labor opposition will be supporting the betting tax legislation amendment Bill 2015. The bill changes the taxation of racing in New South Wales so that taxation rates are eventually brought into line with those applying in Victoria. This, of course, was a policy that the Labor opposition took to the March 2015 election. It was, and I acknowledge that as objection. We announced the policy on the 13th of January 2015 in an announcement made by the opposition leader, Luke Foley MP. And the issue then was the government not supporting these moves. So we congratulate the government for its belated support of the racing industry. Labor made reform of New South Wales's racing tax regime an issue in the 2015 election. We recognise that according to a report by strategic consultants International Event Resources, the New South Wales racing industry generates $3.3 billion of economic activity a year and supports about 50,000 jobs. About 55% of the economic activity is generated in regional New South Wales, with the Hunter generating 18.5% and Western Sydney 13.5% being the largest areas of racing-related activity. Mr Assistant President, New South Wales racing pays the highest state tax in the country. Victoria imposes a tax of 7.6% of gross returns, while New South Wales requires 19.11%. This equates to a tax of $3.22 for every $100 on tote bets and $1.56 in every $100 on fixed odds wages with the Totalisator Agency Board. The bill reduces the taxation of racing, thoroughbred harness and greyhounds in New South Wales over the period from 1 July 2015 to 1 July 2020. It does this by reducing the taxes payable by a totaliser licensee. The tax reduction amount will be passed by the TAB directly to Racing New South Wales and Harness Racing New South Wales. In the case of greyhounds, at least until the Special Commission of Inquiry into greyhound racing is resolved, the money will not be paid to Greyhounds New South Wales but to a trust fund managed by the Secretary of the Department of Justice. Mr Assistant President, this is appropriate given animal welfare concerns. Labor's 2015 election commitment was to bring New South Wales's racing tax regime into alignment with Victoria by 1 January 2016. We felt it was appropriate to meet this commitment by moving an amendment for a faster timetable, which the Labor opposition did in the other place. That amendment was defeated through the government's opposition. We think that, of course, is regrettable, but we will not repeat that amendment in this place in the face of continued opposition by the government. The industry will draw its own conclusions about the government's tardiness in moving towards tax equalisation with Victoria. Under the government's proposal, the benefit to the industry in 2015 would be $19.3 million. Under Labor's alternative plan, it would be about $35 million. That is $70 million for the financial year, but $35 million for the 6 months, 1 January to 30 June 2016. And again, it's a shame the government did not, in the spirit of bipartisanship and constructive engagement, support Labor's initiative. Mr Assistant President, the reforms contained in this legislation will mean more funds will be available for country and regional racing. It will mean more sustainable race clubs, and it will also mean more industry involvement and consultation. Mr Assistant President, Labor has a fine record of achievement in this space, both Australia-wide and in New South Wales. In 1985, former Prime Minister Bob Hawke introduced breeding stock depreciation provisions that brought the Australian regulatory system into line with that applying in New Zealand. This was the instrumental reform that saw the industry grow and achieve more of its potential. In 1997, New South Wales Labor, when it privatised the TAB, it did so in a way that secured a sustainable future for New South Wales racing. In introducing the legislation, the then Minister, Mr Face, said, and I quote, "The proposed legislation provides a competitive taxation structure. The taxation rate on wagering will be reduced from a level equal to 52% of the TAB's wagering revenue to 28.2%, the same level as in Victoria. In common with Victoria, the TAB will, within limits, be able to vary player deductions provided on average. They are approximately 16% of gross wagering turnover," unquote. Labor also secured the merger of the Australian Jockey Club and the Sydney Turf Club to create the Australian Turf Club. Labor also facilitated the funding of $174 million for the redevelopment of Rose Hill through a $24 million grant, and Royal Randwick $150 million via sale of industry funds from trackside to the TAB racecourses. Labor provided assistance to the harness racing industry to relocate from Harold Park to Menangle. Together with Racing New South Wales and Harness Racing New South Wales, Labor defended legal challenges to fee conditions imposed by the legislation that had been introduced, specifically the Racing Administration Act 1998 and the Racing Administration Regulations 2005. This legislation recognised that the racing authorities had copyright over race fields information. It was challenged all the way to the High Court in a process that took years to resolve. But Labor's legislation withstood the challenge, and as a result the racing industry's annual revenues were secured and over time increased. Mr Assistant President, former Treasury Secretary Michael Lambert was engaged in mid-2014 to undertake a review into the New South Wales racing industry, and media stories reported that he had completed his review in late 2014. To date, unfortunately, the government has not published the report or its terms of reference, so the community is still unaware of what Mr Lambert found and recommended. The government should drop the secrecy and release the report and all of its recommendations, which will ensure the community and racing public is aware of all the issues facing the industry and if there is a case for pursuing further reforms. We ask, Mr Assistant President, we ask the Minister in this place to respond, why the secrecy? So with those comments, we will be supporting the legislation and hope that all members in this place do so.